Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz. Born in 1926 in the heat of rural Cuba, he was a child of contradiction. Growing up amidst the lush sugarcane fields, young Fidel was surrounded by the beauty of the Cuban countryside. Yet this picturesque setting was marred by the stark realities of life. His father, a wealthy landowner, instilled in him a love for the land, a respect for hard work. Fidel learned the value of labor, the importance of the soil that fed his people. But this was only one side of the coin. But young Fidel also saw the disparity, the poverty that clung to the shadow of his father's prosperity. He witnessed the stark contrast between his family's wealth and the destitution of the villagers. This duality left a lasting impression on him. His early education in Jesuit schools further fueled the fire in his belly. The rigorous discipline and the exposure to a broad curriculum opened his eyes to the wider world. It was here that he began to question the status quo. He devoured books, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. From history to philosophy, literature to politics, Fidel's hunger for understanding was insatiable. Each book he read added fuel to the growing fire within him. He excelled in academics, but it was history, politics, the stories of revolution that truly captivated him. The tales of great leaders and their struggles for justice resonated deeply with him, planting the seeds of his own revolutionary ideas. The seeds of rebellion were sown. Each story of resistance, each account of defiance against oppression nurtured his growing desire for change. He began to see himself as a part of this larger narrative. He witnessed firsthand the plight of the Guajiros, the peasant farmers, the backbone of Cuba, yet broken by an exploitative system. Their struggles became his own, their dreams of a better life intertwined with his vision for Cuba's future. He saw the corruption, the American influence that held his nation in a chokehold, the foreign control over Cuba's resources, and the complicity of the local elite in this exploitation fueled his anger. He knew that true independence could only come through radical change. The desire for a just, equitable Cuba began to burn bright. This fire in his belly, ignited by the injustices he witnessed and the knowledge he gained, would drive him to become one of the most iconic revolutionary leaders in history. Fidel Castro's journey was just beginning, and the world would soon feel the impact of his unyielding spirit. His path led him to the University of Havana, to the hallowed halls of law. He immersed himself in legal studies, mastering the intricacies of the law, but always with a greater purpose in mind. He recognized the law as a tool for both oppression and liberation. He became a vocal student activist, a fiery orator, his words like sparks igniting a smoldering discontent among his peers. He railed against the injustices plaguing his homeland. His voice, resonant with conviction, found an audience hungry for change. The Batista regime, corrupt and brutal, cast a long shadow over Cuba. Fidel vowed to bring light to his nation. The year 1953 marked a turning point. Fidel, along with his brother Raúl and a band of 80 dedicated revolutionaries, launched a daring assault on the Moncada barracks. The attack failed, but it ignited a flame of resistance that would sweep across the island. Imprisoned, Fidel refused to be silenced. His trial became a platform. His now iconic "History will absolve me" speech a rallying cry for the oppressed. Exiled to Mexico, he regrouped, strategizing, planning, training, the embers of revolution burning ever brighter. The stage was set for a historic return. In 1956, under the cover of darkness, the Granma, a cramped and leaky yacht, carried Fidel and his comrades back to Cuba. Their landing was disastrous, their forces scattered. Yet, from the rugged Sierra Maestra mountains, they waged a relentless guerrilla war. Through sheer grit, strategic brilliance, and the unwavering support of the Cuban people, they chipped away at Batista's forces. The rebels, the barbudos, the bearded ones became symbols of hope. On January 1st, 1959, victory was theirs. Batista fled, and Fidel Castro, El Comandante, rode triumphantly into Havana, greeted by the roar of a liberated people. Section 6, the Bay of Pigs fiasco. Castro faces the American juggernaut. The triumph of the revolution was a thorn in the side of the United States, a beacon of socialism in the Caribbean. In 1961, The CIA-backed invasion at the Bay of Pigs unfolded, an ill-fated attempt to topple Castro's regime. However, the invaders were met with fierce resistance. The invasion was a humiliating defeat for the United States, solidifying Castro's hold on power and pushing Cuba further into the embrace of the Soviet Union. The Cold War had come to Cuba's shores. Section 7. The world holds its breath, Castro and the Cuban Missile Crisis. The world watched in horror as the United States and the Soviet Union teetered on the brink of nuclear war. In 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis gripped the globe, a 13-day standoff that brought humanity closer to annihilation than ever before. Soviet missiles on Cuban soil, a direct response to American missiles in Turkey, sparked a terrifying game of brinksmanship. Through a tense back-channel diplomacy, a deal was struck. The missiles were withdrawn, disaster averted, but the crisis cemented Castro's status on the world stage. He had stared down the most powerful nation on Earth and emerged defiant. Section 8. Legacy of the Comandante, a nation transformed, a world divided. Fidel Castro's rule was marked by contradiction. On one hand, he was a revolutionary leader who sought to uplift the Cuban people through radical reforms. He was a champion of social justice, providing free education and healthcare to all Cubans. Schools and hospitals were built across the island, ensuring that even the poorest had access to these essential services. Literacy rates soared, and infant mortality plummeted. The Cuban education system became a model for many developing nations, and the healthcare system was lauded for its efficiency and effectiveness. Yet his regime was also authoritarian, suppressing dissent and curtailing personal freedoms. Political opponents were jailed, and freedom of speech was severely restricted. He defied the United States, championing socialist ideals and aligning himself with the Soviet Union. This defiance led to decades of tension and conflict, including the infamous Cuban Missile Crisis. His defiance made him a hero to many in the developing world, a symbol of resistance against imperialism. He inspired countless movements and leaders who saw him as a beacon of hope and resilience. But his critics saw him as a dictator, a tyrant who trampled on human rights. Stories of oppression, torture, and exile marred his image, painting a darker picture of his rule. His legacy remains complex, a blend of undeniable achievements and tragic failures. To some, he is a revolutionary hero who transformed a nation. To others, he is a cautionary tale of power and its potential for abuse. Section 9. Adios Comandante, the end of an era and the dawn of a new Cuba. In 2008, after nearly 5 decades at the helm, Fidel Castro stepped down, his health failing. His brother Raúl assumed the presidency, ushering in a period of cautious reform. Fidel's death in 2016 marked the end of an era. Cuba, now navigating a world without its Comandante, faces an uncertain future. The embers of revolution still flicker, but the winds of change are blowing. Fidel Castro's legacy, complex and controversial, will continue to be debated for generations to come. One thing is certain, his impact on Cuba and the world remains undeniable.